Okay, so it is 4 o'clock. So I'm going to get started with the webinar. This is StockTrak new features, the releases that we're going to have for spring 2022. So a lot of these actually have been rolled out onto the site over the last week or so, but some of these aren't going to be available right after the holidays. So my name is Kevin Smith. I'm the Director of Product Development, which means that I have most of the, I work with the developers to actually roll out all the new features based on the feedback we get from professors. So at the end of the presentation, I'll also have time for questions, and I'd be happy to hear any recommendations that you have of things that StockTrak could be doing to be a better resource for your classes. But for the things that you can already expect, here's a general summary. I'm going to break this up into the general improvements we're making across the entire platform, the changes that we're making to trading and research functions, and the changes to the administration functions in the reports. So to get started with the general improvements to the platform as a whole, the first and foremost is our new beta version. So if you attended my webinar talking about new features for this fall, you also would have seen this the same slide basically, where we have been developing a new version of the StockTrak trading platform. This one it's a redesign of every single page on the site, so it's a huge project that's taking the better part of a year. But instead of having all of the pages released to the students as soon as we get them and then find out there might be bugs, instead what we're doing is we're allowing students to opt in to beta test these new pages one at a time. So we just have released our new equities trading page. We're releasing most of our trading pits over the holiday break. And then your students coming in for the spring will have the opportunity to use either the StockTrak as it exists today, or they can try out the new version and give us their feedback. That way we make sure it's a completely clean release when it comes out for everybody. Now, the biggest changes for this interface, the reason why we actually made the change to begin with is that it's optimized for all devices, where it works perfectly fine on desktop, tablets, and mobile. That's always been a kind of a shortcoming of the StockTrak trading platform, where we do have a mobile version, but it doesn't have all of the features, and so this one is making sure that it's usable on every single device. There's also all kinds of improvements to the layout, to the information and how it's presented, and there's a lot of other stuff packed into this update as well. Relating to mobile functionality and how students are interacting with StockTrak, we're also on the verge of releasing a new StockTrak app. So this is going to be a downloadable app for both Android and iPhones. We are in the middle of QA of this app. My developers say they're going to send me a new version of it today to test out. Basically, this has everything there is on StockTrak except for the budgeting game for personal finance classes, but it has all the trading, it has all of the assignments, and all the other features packed into a mobile app to make it a little bit easier for students to access on the go. Now, StockTrak already has a mobile version built into the web interface, but a lot of students do prefer to manage it with an app, so they would have it alongside of their other finance apps that they do their research with. So we're intending to launch this in January 2022, so just in time for the spring classes. It is possible that it could be delayed a little bit because we want to make sure it's completely perfect before it goes out, but it will be coming out very early in the spring semester. Otherwise, general improvements to our trading and research. So risk-adjusted returns. I've been talking about this for a while now, where we've been putting a lot of time and effort into improving the risk-adjusted rankings that we have built into StockTrak. So the first and foremost, the Sharpe ratio, this calculation has been improved in that it no longer includes weekends. So it's just weekdays. That way it's just the trading days are included in the calculation. The old versions included the weekends, which means that the portfolio's standard deviation was lower than it should have been, so it artificially inflated the Sharpe ratio a little bit compared to what you would actually expect in the real world. We're also just finished developing and are about to roll out our new Jensen's Alpha rankings. This replaces our previous Alpha Beta rankings. The biggest difference is that our Jensen's Alpha is based on the portfolio itself, not the individual holdings. That way, the Jensen's Alpha, the risk-adjusted return, is basically based on everything in the portfolio. It's not dependent on the data fees that we're getting on it. This makes the biggest difference for classes that are trading, derivatives, international exchanges where we may not have had the beta in our data feeds in the past, so the alpha beta were not reliable, but this will be going forward. We're also including the Trenner ratio as a new risk-adjusted ranking type. So all of this, the development is finished. We're just about to roll it out into the actual user interface in the next couple of weeks here over the holidays. The other updates to the trading function, so we have updates to the open positions exports. In the past, the way StockTrak works is that we would take a snapshot of your students' open positions every Friday and at the end of the tournament. So they'd be able to see some view of what their open positions were over time. With our most recent update, we did make it so that students, we take a snapshot of the open positions every single day of the tournament. That way your students can look back on any single day and see how the performance went. It's all exportable, so both you and your students can get that information anytime. Bond payments. So we've had more and more fixed income classes using StockTrak, and we've had some pushes to improve our bond accounting. So we always have paid out the interest on bonds, but it wasn't really visible for students. It was just added to their cash balances. So with this update, students actually see the bond interest as a transaction on their account. So they see when it was paid and how much they got paid. So it's a lot clearer for them to actually understand how their bonds are performing over time. The last one, futures expirations. So over the last year and a half or so, we've had a lot of professors mention that their students were having problems with having futures in their portfolio that just weren't expiring on time. We did a lot of digging, and we found out the reason was because StockTrak has been using the current back end we've had for over 10 years now, which meant that futures from 2010 were conflicting with futures from 2020 because the symbology you had was just, zero. So that's been fixed. We've had this resolved. So if you're using futures in your class and you're experiencing some issues with this over the last semester or two, they are resolved for the semesters going forward. So that brings us into administration. So this is where a lot of the improvements we've been really focusing on for the last year. So the assignments engine in particular has gotten a pretty significant update that it's going to help quite a bit for your class, especially if you use our articles and other integrated lessons. So the first and foremost is to help you actually plan out how you're doing your assignments for your class by adding the estimated time of completion for each of the assignment tasks. So we started collecting this information at the beginning of the fall, and we just are implementing it onto the assignments engine right now. So the next time you go to create an assignment for your class, you can see actually how much you're asking your students to accomplish any given week. This has, anytime you create or edit your assignment, it'll have the amount per task, and then it'll show you the sum total of what you're asking your students to accomplish. We didn't put a time for the trading tasks because this can vary so much, but all of the other lessons do have the estimated time of completion. We also added quite a few new lessons. So we added a whole new set of curriculum for introductory business to various business classes. So 36 lessons on introductory economics, 22 introductory accounting, some management and marketing as well. So depending on the discipline you're looking at, these are good supplements to your classes. This is not really a textbook replacement, but it is a good idea. It's mostly used in the testing that we've done so far. The feedback we've gotten for it is a professor who wants to give their students a refresher of some of the basic concepts for the higher level classes, or a lot of times we find professors wanting to borrow lessons from some other topics for their classes. So for example, this accounting lesson, financial analysis through key ratios, we find a lot of professors using this across the board of taking this lesson and including with their finance classes, so because it is kind of relevant to various disciplines. Just like with all the rest of our lessons, you can mix and match them with everything else in order to suit your class. For our, I have a question here. Would the assignments be available on the app? Yes, we have the assignments engine are available on the app. All of the lessons, videos, and everything else are there as well. And yes, we will be sending out quite a few emails actually when the app is available to download, both to professors to let them know it's available and to the students who have registered for StockTrak to know they can download it. So the app is not very useful unless we get students to use it, so yes, we are going to be pushing quite a bit to get students to sign up and use it. The next update is again for the assignments engine. So if you're using StockTrak in a financial literacy class, which is actually the most growth that we've seen lately, are financial literacy classes leveraging StockTrak as both our stock game and budgeting game. We've reorganized our personal finance lessons into units and included both introduction lessons, like very short, 500 words, here's what this concept is at high level, and unit assessments. So after your students finish all of the lessons that are in a particular topic, you can add the assessment to that has quiz questions pulled from all of the previous articles. So if you've used StockTrak's assignments in the past, you'll know that every lesson that we have has an assessment at the end, but that means that the student really can look at the article while they're taking the assessment. These unit assessments are trying to divorce them from just being able to scroll up and see the answer right away. You will, of course, with everything else you have, be able to see how long your students have taken to complete all of these lessons and all the assessments as well, so you can have a sense of who knew it off the top of their head, who was doing extra research while they're trying to complete it. And with that in mind, the assignment professor reporting is massively enhanced. Historically, you would be able to see if your students completed one of the lessons and the grade they got on it. With the update that we are launching, I'm hoping this week, but it may be early next week, you're going to be able to see the individual responses that every student had on every single quiz question on every single lesson that you assigned them. You'll also be able to see how long it took them to complete each of the lessons, and you'll be able to see summaries for your class saying, on average, how long did your students take to complete this? On average, what questions are your students getting right and what questions are they getting wrong, to help you zone in on areas that students are still struggling in the class. The only one that doesn't have the full reporting is if you're using our Investing 101 chapters, and that's because it's spread over several lessons, and so we don't have that whole summary data. You'll still see the summaries of how the students did on the quizzes, but the timestamps you'll see is just really how long they took for the quiz itself, not the entire chapter. So that is all we have at a high level. The other enhancement that you can look forward to for the spring is we are making some changes to our European data feeds. We just kind of finished talking with our vendors right before I had this webinar, so I didn't have time to make slides for it, but we're going to be, for a lot of our continental European exchanges, we have partial coverage, but we use delayed data, which means that some stocks don't have the correct bid and ask prices. The volume is quite low. And we did that just to make sure that students could trade them more readily on exchanges where we didn't have full coverage. We're changing that over the winter break. For all the European exchanges that we currently have on the site, we're switching to full market coverage, but end-of-day data. So students' trades are going to execute a little bit later than they do now, but they're going to be able to trade everything they could possibly want to trade. Otherwise, our focus for the spring as of right now, before we have a flood of professor feedback over the winter break, is we're really focusing on options. We're looking at increasing the ways we can do option spreads and improving the calculations for margin requirements on spreads. So that's one of our big focuses for the first quarter of 2022. So any other questions or comments? All right, so yeah, that was a pretty quick webinar, so I hope I didn't take up too much of your time this afternoon. There is also a recording available for it for if you have any colleagues that were not able to make it. So, and if you have any questions or comments or things that really you think we could be doing better or something that would help your class, send me an email, ksmith@stocktrak.com. Around this time of the year is when I meet with the development team and the rest of the StockTrak team. We talk about what professors need the most over the next 12 months, and that's where all of our updates come from. So any thoughts or comments that you have, I'd be happy to hear them.